Ladies and gentlemen, can you imagine walking down Attica 12,000 years ago? You'd be surrounded by an incredible megafauna. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, lions, hippos, hyenas. Where did they all go? What happened to all of them? How did concrete buildings replace our megafauna? We always think that change and development is for the better, but when can we stop? How much is enough? How much is too much? When will we know that we went too far? My name is Ajar Shadila, I'm 13 years old, and I'm originally from Kyrgyzstan, which is a country that is 94% surrounded by nature, covered by mountainous terrain and sublime green forests. So, coming to Greece, I experienced a great shift in landscape. It was surprising to see just how urbanized Europe is. Tall, monotonous buildings and busy cities. You know what I mean. And ever since then, I've been thinking and reading and researching about this change. And then, I stumbled upon this word, a word that for me changed everything. That word is rewilding. 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 So, what is it? Well, rewilding is a fairly new approach at reversing the damages to the natural world and an attempt at mass restoration of the ecosystem. Rewilding is about unlearning of the artificial standards society has placed upon us and letting the wild out. This might sound confusing, but bear with me. So how exactly does rewilding work and help nature? Well, rewilding is essentially taking a big chunk of land and leaving it be, letting nature consume and reclaim it. Or, another way is, again, taking a big chunk of land and reintroducing a species to it. And then again, leaving it be. One of the most famous examples of rewilding is arguably the Yellowstone Wolf Project. In 1995, wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone, America's first national park. Without them, the ecosystem of the park has fallen out of balance. The number of elks and deers exploded. I mean, there were literally 17,000 of them, which may not sound like a lot, but compared to the 8,000, which is how many there are now, it was a lot. And the overgrazing they caused greatly reduced the number of trees, such as aspens and willows. And without those trees, the number of songbirds started to decline, riverbanks started to erode, and beavers could no longer build their dams. And so, without beaver dams and the shade from those trees, the water temperatures were too hot for the cold water fish. So those fish started to die out. And all the animals that rely on those fish started to go extinct. The ecosystem was just a mess. But as soon as wolves were reintroduced, they helped to balance out the scales by obviously killing some elks and deers, but still, they helped nature to stabilize. And why do we as humans care about any of this, you may ask? Well, nature is a part of who we are. It is the source of our power. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. And this isn't some groundbreaking discovery. While officially the idea that nature is a part of us was first put forward by Edward O. Wilson in his book Biophilia, which was published in 1984. In many ways, it has always existed. Biophilia literally means love of life and living things. And so, the biophilia hypothesis suggests that as humans, we have this innate desire to connect with nature and different aspects of it. It suggests that almost on a genetic level, humans have a natural love for plants, wildlife, and all living things. If this sounds familiar, then Aristotle was actually one of the first, out of many, to put forward this concept that humans have a love of life. And this hypothesis can actually be backed up by psychology, evolutionary psychology to be exact. The idea that history has made us like this. Our ancient ancestors have always relied on nature as the source of our power. It is what helped them survive, as it provided them with all things necessary for survival: food, shelter, and water. Nature has shaped them to be who they are, and it has stayed with humankind throughout centuries and evolutions. One example of biophilia is Japanese forest bathing. Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, fortunately doesn't require actually bathing in the forest. It is instead the process of connecting with nature. While establishing that connection may differ for everyone, it is usually through the five senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. Japanese forest bathing is about reconnecting with nature. In addition, it has many health benefits, such as lowering blood pressure, heart rate, level of toxins in the body, and many more. Studies have found that simply spending 10 to 20 minutes a day forest bathing, essentially just spending time outside, could lead to decreased levels of stress and increased levels of happiness. And I know that everyone always says that, but the reason they keep repeating it is because it's true. Rewilding is essential for both nature and us humans. Some of its benefits are: it reduces biodiversity loss, and it helps nature adapt to climate change, so animals have a lesser chance of going extinct due to it. Furthermore, it actually helps fight climate change, as rewilding draws carbon from the atmosphere. And according to calculations done by Rewilding Britain, rewilding over 6 million hectares, which is less than half the size of Greece, could sequester 47 million tons of CO2 per year, which is more than a tenth of the current UK greenhouse gas emissions. And the reason this has a positive effect on us humans is because we rely on nature the same way a child relies on their mother. So, if rewilding is so good and so important to us, then why haven't we done it? Well, I think it goes without saying that something this significant cannot happen without some sort of obstacles. So, what are some obstacles to rewilding, you may ask? Well, if you remember, I previously said that rewilding requires a big chunk of land to be left alone. Yeah, this is already an obstacle, as it would and is viewed as leaving a big chunk of land unproductive in a classical economic sense. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, we as humans have been trained to determine the productivity of something by its profits. Now, the question of whether or not that is incorrect is obviously not up to me to decide. However, there is nothing innate about it. We just have been trained to do so. And it so happens to be that some people, especially farmers and business owners, believe that it is morally incorrect to leave land unproductive when it could be used for agriculture, mining, industrializing, or even residential uses. I mean, is it really worth it to basically give away land? Land we could probably use, probably need to use. Another obstacle to rewilding is, if rewilding requires big chunks of land and wild animals to be left alone, then how on earth could it be safe? I mean, think about it. No one wants wild wolves walking around freely, do they? Again, this is a bit frustrating for farmers. I know, that's for farmers. But if they're shepherds, or generally have sheep or any other animal that could be viewed as target, or more realistically food, then they will constantly be in danger. Meaning, the farmer will constantly be in danger of losing their profit. This begs the question, is rewilding realistic? Is it achievable? Or is it some fantasy, an ideology of a utopian world? Can we overcome these obstacles? Or am I, just delusional? Well, I'd like to believe that I'm not, but before I give some of the most prominent ways to overcome these obstacles, I'd like to clarify some things. I keep mentioning farmers, so I think it's time to clarify that farming is actually unprofitable in large parts of Europe. And the only reason livestock farms keep functioning is due to subsidies from the government. Curious to know why? Well, raising livestock is not actually natural for Europe. Domesticated farm animals are not European. Sheep, for example, have been actually brought from Iraq thousands of years ago. All of this makes me question, should we really be too worried about livestock if they're not natural for Europe? Perhaps they just don't belong in this European environment. That said, here are some of my ways to overcome the previously mentioned obstacles. First of all, rewilding is going to require a firm legal regulation. For example, how much land are we willing to give to rewilding? How much are we willing to invest? Or how often and how many species we want to reintroduce? This will keep the process going steadily and gradually, but safely, in order to make sure that we are safe and that we're not overdoing it. This will also help us protect our agriculture, so hopefully those farmers will be happy. Second of all, in my mind, rewilding is going to require an educational press campaign, so that people understand why we're doing it, why is it important, and how is it beneficial. Kind of like what I'm doing here today. Let's make sure that all those poor farmers know that this is not for nothing. And so perhaps the government could teach rewilding at schools the same way they teach us that smoking is bad, instead of subsidizing farms. But my last, yet most important and most realistic point for today is, rewilding cannot happen until a wider restructure. Rewilding is going to require a wider restructure of our society and our mindsets. It cannot happen until we re-establish our priorities. What are our, as the youths, the new generation's priorities? I mean, the fact that the land that is being kept specifically to help nature restore itself is being looked at as unproductive already shows us that the real problem lies beneath the surface. And so, no matter how many solutions we propose, the problem lies deeper. So, ladies and gentlemen, the question I would like to leave with you today is not whether rewilding is possible, but is rather whether or not we are ready to rewild. Thank you.